electronic cigarette. What is it? Since 1963, the technology has existed to make a cigarette that vaporized water and other ingredients instead of burning tobacco. The E-Cig didn't really begin to gain commercialized prevalence until the year 2000, but in the last decade, we've seen ads for these unconventional devices popping up. Perhaps common knowledge hasn't quite kept up. Surgeon General warnings, studies, and relatives with lung disease have educated us about traditional cigarettes. However, many of us hardly know what the E-Cig is. Let's take a dive into this subject. First, we'll be going over what the E-Cig is and its basic components. Next, the pros of the E-Cig, and thirdly, the cons. So to start off, let's talk about the basic components of the electronic cigarette. First off, you have your battery or power source. It's a lithium-ion type, the same that you'll find in your laptops, cell phones, what have you, and it's usually charged by a USB, wall, or car charger. It's activated by an airflow sensor, so when you inhale and the vapor runs past, that turns on the battery. So many of these don't even have, a switch or anything. It's off, it can sit in my pocket or whatever, and then I inhale, and it turns on. Right? Longer inhalations are easier because it activates and then the air moves by. There's also often an LED at the end, like you saw in mine, which just resembles kind of an ember type burn to make it look more like a cigarette. Some of them look less like a cigarette. Anyways, the battery, it's the most distal portion of the E-Cig, so it's farthest out on the electronic cigarette. Now the second component of the E-Cig is a bit closer to the user space. That's the atomizer or vaporizer. It's usually a heating coil or ultrasound emitter, so pretty high tech, and the temperature of the vapor varies. It's warmer if you inhale slowly because it spends more time over the vaporizer, whereas it's cooler if you inhale quickly. But in general, it's cooler than tobacco smoke, which is something actually burning. This is just vaporizing. You do start to see particle buildup on the atomizer over time, and eventually they will burn out, so they'll need replaced. Now when an atomizer is combined with the cartridge, you have a cartomizer. And that brings us to the cartridge. The last and third piece of the E-Cig is the cartridge. It serves as the mouthpiece and houses the liquids to be vaporized. Those are propylene glycol or vegetable glycerin, which are PG or VG. Now you can read a Health New Zealand October 2007 article simply titled E-Cig Health Information Sheet, and they talk about that and how it's mostly used in food additives or asthma inhalers. Also, there's often a mixture of PG and VG in the E-Cig liquids. Additionally, there's flavorings and nicotine in varying concentrations. I use the 0 milligram per deciliter ones, which have no nicotine, and someone who's a heavy smoker would want to use the really high ones, which are at about 28. And you just replace or refill these cartridges. One cartridge is about equal to a pack of cigarettes. So this is a cartridge for you. You just screw them on, screw them off, replace them. Again, the three parts of the E-Cig are the battery, atomizer, and cartridge for containing liquids. Now that we know what the electronic cigarette is made of, let's talk about some of the potential benefits of such a device. For one, it's cheaper, so I'll go over some of that math with you. For this particular brand, $25 startup cost, and then you buy 5 cartridge replacement packs, which are $13.50 per pack of 5. Now, a cartridge, like I said, is about a pack of cigarettes, so that's like $2.70 per pack if you're comparing it to cigarettes. Conventional cigarettes being more like $4.50 or so, you break even after about 14 packs. So that's like 2 weeks, and you're looking at, if you smoke a pack a day, that would pay off after 2 weeks, and then you're looking at 40% savings after that. And it's not taxed like tobacco, that's why it's cheaper. Another benefit is that the E-Cig satisfies nicotine cravings, maybe even permanently, so you can ramp down if you're a heavy smoker from high concentration to 0, and it lacks tobacco and burning carcinogens. Since nothing's being burnt, much lower chance of lung cancer and cardiovascular disease is likely being reduced. Now you can smoke indoors usually, and in public places and no smoking areas. No secondhand smoke, just water vapor and flavorings. However, airlines have a bit of a problem with you pulling these out. They're just scary to them. They don't fully understand them yet. you've got a battery, and it kind of looks like someone's smoking. So there's an interesting article about that called Dangerous Goods on United.com where they reference that. So we've seen what the E-Cig is made of, some of its advantages. Now, there's a flip side to every coin, so let's explore the negative aspects of this device. It's not FDA regulated, and the FDA advises the public that they think it lacks appropriate warnings. It's often not advertised as a smoking cessation device, which seems kind of fishy. There's still altogether clinical uncertainties and much unknown about the E-Cig. And there's also the hazard of water in the lungs. So one user I know said she was coughing something awful after several weeks. So there's a possibility we're trading lung cancer for pneumonia. Additionally, there's been reports of an exploding power cell. Now, it was believed to be modified, but that still makes me think twice when I raise that to my face and think about it exploding in my teeth, right? So there's an article from CSPN.net about that, about the exploding cig. Also, you're not curing the addiction, you're just satisfying nicotine craving. If you know smokers, they're battling much more than just nicotine addiction, so there is that problem. It does have the nicotine, so maybe we're creating a gateway effect problem. There's all these delicious varieties of flavors that it comes in too. So they've had to adapt laws so that minors can't have them, because traditionally the laws center around regulating tobacco, which this isn't, but it has nicotine. And the PG I was talking about, propylene glycol, presents certain hazards, whereas VG causes pimple reactions in some people. This is mostly anecdotal evidence from forums because, like I said, the studies are still out on this one because it's such a new technology. There's a number of unknown toxins and hazards and chemicals in these. The FDA found 3 nitrosamines on their FDA.gov newsletter. Kind of interesting, maybe worrying. So you've seen a glimpse of the ingredients, benefits, and hazards of smoking an electronic cigarette. The E-Cig can be considered an alternative to smoking, although much information about its health impacts remains unknown. It's certainly cheaper for the time being, but at the moment, it's hard to be sure if it's safer. We can only expect that time will reveal more to us about this mysterious device that you can puff on while indoors. That's all I got for you guys. What kind of curiosities, questions, inquiries do you have? Because, yeah, all right, that's what I'm talking about. Because it's crazy, right? You're like, what is this? Yeah.
Well, I know that an electronic cigarette came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and I didn't look like that.
Right.
It didn't look like a real cigarette, you know. I mean, it was like a kind of metal thing that you did, and I was curious as to whether, you know, they're kind of both the same.
Yeah, right. So there is totally both. I didn't really talk about that because I was trying to, you know, hit pros, cons, and yeah, but they're totally are the ones that look like pens or are more discreet and don't look like cigarettes at all. And I think that's what most users kind of prefer because it allows them to use it inside without getting those weird looks. Like if you're careful with it, you can use those ones inside and then kind of blow off the vape.
Like if you go into a bar or a restaurant, they don't allow smoking and building, you're going to get attacked. You know, they're going to say, you can't smoke in here.
Yeah, usually people have been pretty successful defending themselves and saying, this is an electronic cigarette, it's just water vapor that's secondhand, so I can smoke it here. Yeah. About 2 years, just really intermittently, just now and then. What I wanted to be able to do was blow smoke rings indoors. So, yeah. I started off with a tobacco pipe just to make me look pretentious, and because I figured tobacco pipe's less addictive because you don't generally inhale the smoke. But nobody really likes you burning tobacco inside. So I found out about the E-Cig and that they have the 0 nicotine cartridges, and I was like, hey, that's perfect. So, yeah, so.
Yeah.
I'll try it. I don't know if I could do it since everyone's watching. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So there's trace amounts because it's made in the same factories. That's another thing that scared the FDA and everyone's kind of worrying about because they're being advertised as zero nicotine right on the package, but there is some nicotine in there. It's very low amounts is what they're finding, but they're also finding that the measurements they put on the packages aren't always consistent right to the T. Sometimes there's a little more variation than the manufacturer would like you to believe, right?
So have you smoked any the type of cigar that you smoked previously?
I've never smoked a conventional cigarette.
Okay, because my other question was going to be,
How does it compare?
well, yeah, and do you find yourself addicted? How I used to smoke for 7 years,
Okay.
and it's been 4 years since I quit,
Right.
or I've been clean for 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's an accomplishment. Congrats.
Yeah. So I just wanted to know, when you don't have your cereal cartridge, do you crave?
No, I really don't. And I'll go weeks without using it and then be with a group of friends and use it as like kind of a social thing when they're smoking.
So you just want to be cool.
Pretty much, yeah. But yeah, I don't, to answer your question, I don't really ever have any cravings like, I really need my E-Cig right now. But I'm sure if I was using the stronger ones, it could definitely be like that.
Is the vapor warm?
Yeah, it's kind of warm. Like I said, it's usually cooler than tobacco smoke, especially cigarette smoke. Cigarettes are notoriously hot, hotter than cigars and tobacco pipes. But I was actually trying to find sites that said this is the temperature of E-Cig vapor, and it just varies so much. I couldn't get solid numbers because, like I said, there's that problem where if you inhale quickly, it's very cool. And if you inhale slowly, it can get like hot, like scald your mouth almost. So, yeah.
So is the FDA regulated yet?
No, like I said, it's not FDA regulated, but they're just kind of advising people about it and warning people about it, and they're doing tests, and legislation is in the works to try and control it. Make sense?
Sort of. So that it can sell it, but the FDA has no
Yeah,
say over how to use it.
so I don't fully understand it, to be honest, but I think it has something to do with, since it's generally not being advertised as a smoking cessation device, and it's not being advertised to cure or treat an illness or disease, then, I can sell you cardboard, right? And I'm not saying it cures cancer, so the FDA is not going to regulate my cardboard, probably. Yeah, and I don't know, I'd have to look at the packaging actually and see what kind of warnings are added in it. That'd be interesting to see. Yeah, like I said, I don't know. Yeah, you got the best of me there. Yeah.
Do you know any smokers that used to smoke cigarettes and they switched to?
Yeah, so my brother. Well, it helped him. For about 2 weeks, he started feeling a lot better. His lungs felt amazing, and it was like looking great, and then he lost it. But his model was more expensive, so he didn't really want to replace it. But I think it did help him a lot. But again, he was battling that thing I was talking about where it's more than just the nicotine craving. He wanted a cigarette. He didn't want this thing that looks like a cigarette but doesn't taste like one, doesn't feel like one.
So, in your personal opinion, do you recommend using e-cigarettes to people who are trying to quit smoking, like to slowly downgrade the nicotine level?
Yeah, and so much of the evidence being anecdotal that I can't cite clinical facts that it's safer, but I do personally believe, and there's a lot of doctors that have suspicions that it reduces cardiovascular disease and lung disease, so I think it's a good
I know
idea.
that nicotine is kind of what hooks people.
Right.
So, even though they don't want the feeling, but they just want to quit more, do you recommend it?
Yeah, I think if someone's really serious about getting off of conventional cigarettes, they could find this to be a nice kind of alleyway where they can just sort of hang out, because you get the nicotine from it.
The motions of it?
Yeah, right. The habit of I do something and then I put this thing in my mouth and breathe in and blow smoke out. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Have you seen anything about
Have I seen anything? Or?
Bunch of
Yeah, well, like I said, there was that article about the exploding power cell. And it's really hard to research because there's only really one reported case that I could find. So, and I freaked out about that when I saw it, right? Because I was like, oh my God, this thing's going to blow up in my teeth, right? So I was trying to find out more about it, but it seemed like the first responders that showed up, from what they released, it sounded like it was a modified cell, like an e-cigar with big old batteries and power cells. So, and lithium batteries, that's one of the characteristics of lithiums, is when you overcharge them or run them too low or vary their power output suddenly, they tend to burst into flames. Right. Yeah, so I think the idea is if you're modifying them and they're getting charged or depleted too quickly, they have that potential. Hopefully all the ones out there are fairly safe from exploding, but again, it's something we don't know yet because there hasn't been the time, the research, and all the evidence to back that up.
One more question?
One more question.
Yeah.
How long does one of those cigarettes last before you have to get another one?
Right, so like I was saying, these cartridges are about equivalent to a pack of cigarettes, supposedly, and then in here you have, actually this is a cartomizer, so like I was saying, it has the cartridge and atomizer combined into one, so there's a little heating element in there and the propylene glycol or VG, and then this shouldn't really burn out as much since it just has the battery. Eventually battery goes bad, but that's probably a couple of years.
Okay, so you can usually buy replacement, like filter.
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
what I'm
So
calling it.
5 of these for $13.50.
Okay, so 5 packs for 13.
Right.
That's cheaper.
Yeah, like I was doing my math, it's about $2.70 a pack compared to smoking 6.
Thank you, Max.
So, yeah.